Hello, everybody. Welcome to International Edition of Everything in Moderation podcast. It is episode 16. And today we have a very interesting topic. Who would like to tell the viewers what we're discussing today?
Can. So we're discussing what's going on in the southern and northern borders of Ukraine right now. And that is just a military exercise, everyone. Believe it or not, that's what the Russian officials have told everybody. But U.S. military officials have looked into it. It doesn't really look like it. It seems like there is a split force, 40,000 troops on the northern side of the border, all along the border, and then there is 40,000 troops in Crimea right now, tanks, everything. They are fully ready for a complete invasion of Ukraine. And, it's just not being talked about a lot. But, I guess we can kind of been seeing this for a while now with Russia and Crimea, at least. I mean, they kind of just annexed them, so why don't they go for the whole pot? But the big question here is, why is this happening in the first place?
So I'll take the reins here because I've been I first took notice of this in my sophomore year of high school. I'm about to graduate, which is that just tells you all you need to know. This has been going on for a very long time. So it started off with this thing called the Euromaidan. It was Ukrainian student protest because they wanted the country to join the EU because we're going to get into the dynamic, but specifically West Ukraine is a lot more European than Eastern Ukraine, and you'll see how that affects this situation. So they wanted to join the EU, which would have been a decent move for them. Their currency sucks. It's been useless since 2014. So switching to the euro might have brought them a little more economic stability, but it wasn't only that. They wanted the EU policies with just everything. And when this deal was proposed, the president at the time declined it and decided to pursue relations with more close relations with Russia. A lot of young Ukrainians did not like that. I mean, hell, even a lot of old Ukrainians didn't like that. Because Ukraine and Russia, people were like, oh, it's like the same thing. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's basically the same thing. No, not even close. There is a big rivalry between the two that stems all the way back to ancient history, where Russia was the capital was in the Kievan Rus. So Russia's civilization started where Ukraine is now, specifically where Ukraine's capital is. So maybe this is some scheme for Russia to bring back the land of their Viking ancestors.
That's so Viking ancestors.
That would be a very loaded thing. I really don't think I don't really think.
Trace it to Norway now.
Yeah,
bring it all to Norway now.
But Christian, just real quick, I want to touch on one of the dynamics that you talked about earlier. You said that there is a difference between Eastern Ukrainians and Western Ukrainians. Yeah. Now, if you know anything about Ukrainians' history, specifically that I was a part of the Soviet Union for an extremely long time, it is kind of half. The people there are pretty much like Russians too. Mm-hmm. They're like part Russian, and they actually have a significant portion of their population that are just straight ethnically Russian as well.
Yep.
But they've been in that society for so long, and every single time Ukraine fights for its independence, some huge power immediately steamrolls it. Like before Russia, it was Poland. The dynamic never changes there, right? Yeah. And that dynamic where you said there's Western and Eastern. I think one thing back from the Soviet years, I think it was in 1950s, they had a program where they transferred migrants from Ukraine into Russia, and they also did it to the other way. So they sent Russian migrants to Ukraine. So they they were trying to slowly like cipher the population. It didn't really work out too well, surprisingly. It only, I would say, have like dipped their population down from 7%, but it created a significant Russian population within there, and it's literally in Crimea because it's right next, and that's exactly where they can migrate to and be at. So that's where that dynamic comes from. It's pretty crazy, right? That like, all back then that program pretty much won them Crimea before. Like if you go there, most people, I don't want to say most people, a good portion of people, probably the majority, are going to be like, yeah, I don't really care.
Oh yeah, when they were annexed, they had to hand in their Ukrainian passports for Russian ones, and like 89% of the Crimean population turned in their passports. So that tells you all you really need to know.
Yeah.
Just to kind of go back to the historical dynamic too, a lot of people don't really know this, but there's a little thing called World War II. And prior to that, there was actually Stalin ordered a genocide on Ukrainians called the Holodomor. It had the numbers of dead is often refuted, but like historians say it's probably around 3.5 million, which is pretty huge. And so after this happens, this is like right before World War II. It's like 15 years before. So there are certain people that lived through it. It was the largest man-made famine in history. So when the
Really?
Nazis rolled through Ukraine, Ukrainians welcomed them with open arms because they were like, they're here to save us. They're here to save us from Stalin. Like that was just to put in perspective, like how much of a punching bag Ukraine sort of was for Soviet Russia back in the day. And you still see that dynamic now a little bit with them kind of bullying them at the moment, however you'd like to categorize it.
Yeah. You know what that has resulted in. I always find that this happens a lot of times with countries that constantly get into conflict over and over and over again. It either increases the amount of extremely fundamental religion people there are, aka an example you could say is like Afghanistan with the Taliban, or you could say in this case, like there's a lot of white nationalists in Ukraine, and that actually makes up the bulk of like that kind of military force in Ukraine. Like that's like their kind of like
Right.
freedom movement. And it's really happened because all that history, and it's fresh in everybody's minds. Like they talk to their grandpa, they're going to tell them about it. They talk to their father, they're definitely going to tell them about it. And it's definitely a youth movement as well. So
You
that
definitely
dynamic's pretty interesting.
you definitely see like how since Ukraine bared the full brunt of their experience with communism, they severely ostracize themselves to the right to where like it's just pure racism almost. And that like they're a country that vehemently wants to stay Ukrainian. Like they want very, very conservative country, very, very conservative country.
Well, when I think of communism and then I guess a long history or battle between two countries, one being quite communist, I think of also Taiwan and China. And there's also there's like a growing nationalism in China as well, especially when the KMT went there, and the KMT was quite right as well. I mean, you can compare that to Ukraine right now. That's how I see it. Of course, the history is even deeper between Ukraine and Russia, like much, much further back. But I find that an interesting comparison as well.
So I just want to show the viewers the dynamic of the country that we talked about and where it tends to split. So here we have a map of Ukraine. So pretty much, if you follow the river, it'll tell you what language is mostly being spoken. So on this side, the west side, all the way down to Odessa and Ismail, you get more Ukrainian speaking. So like over here, this is the most Ukrainian speaking. As you tend to move farther to the center, especially in the capital, Kiev, you're gonna hear. It's kind of strange. Like they speak Ukrainian at home, but like when they go to school and work, they speak Russian. Very like interwoven language culture. It's not all that different, but like if you were to listen to both, you'd say, oh, it's probably the same thing, but there is like a lot of fundamental differences. But
Yeah, it draws from the other Slavic languages, I think.
yeah,
Other
like the
than
Ukrainian
Russian.
sounds more like Polish.
Yeah, I think that's literally what they draw from.
Mm-hmm.
Is like Polish speak, but
They have similar last names as well. A lot of itches and like ICs and stuff like that, especially in the Slavic area.
With Ukrainian names, you could get they normally end with like Chuk, Enko,
as well,
etc. Yeah. So then when you get here, when you pass the Dnieper River, this is where it's basically a satellite Russia. It's very it's sort of like an era that's sort of like an area that's left in history almost. Specifically Donetsk. Donetsk is a huge mining area, as well as Kharkiv. It's you see a lot of this. You see a lot of mining in East Ukraine, and then what Danny was discussing earlier, and what the main controversy of this is Crimea right here.
Yeah, a little cool thing that we have the map up. Sorry, it's all good. I just want to point something out. If anybody knows the event Chernobyl, if you look right on the map, and then you pretty much go left from there, and just take your hand and go whoosh. That's the effect radius of Chernobyl, and all that area you can't grow shit in. Completely, like there's areas where if you walk into it, you'll just die. You can walk around most of it, but you can't grow anything there.
I heard
nothing. That is some crazy stuff, and that's one place I want to go before I die because I want to drink.
This might be a myth there. With Chernobyl, this might be a myth, but I heard that outside of the area, like the nuclear effect has caused crazy growth, like some weird animals and just larger than life plants and stuff. But
there's definitely a lot more animals because all the humans are gone.
Oh well, yeah, that's true.
There's no humans there at all. Like there's like dead, some along the borders, but there's places where like we live there, we'll just get cancer and like die at 40.
There are scientists that are working there. They kind of like enclosed the reactor with like a tarp kind of thing. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. I don't know if they took it off or not, but basically they want to contain it and they want to sort of bring it back to where they can maybe put people again. But
it'll take
many years.
2,000 years because you can't grow on any of that. All that's irradiated. Like there's like a plant or plants if you eat, you'll diminish all the calcium in your bones, and then you'll just be like, oh, I'm breaking everything like constantly. There's some crazy stuff. Like radiation is nothing to be fucked with.
One of the strategies that like I've seen Ukrainian people say, like with their aggression with Russia, they're like get like a bunch of industrial fans and just fan all the cancer to Russia.
That'd be really smart.
Or windmills. The windmills.
Yeah.
I mean that's basically what they did to them, during the Soviet era. The guy was
military strategy.
Whatever.
Yeah, so let's kind of begin the discussion on the war in Donbass. That's where I'll bring up a map of that too, just so people can understand where the fighting is. Obviously, it's eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian military wasn't really able to do anything about Crimea. The way that Russia annexed it is they had like a bunch of troops move in overnight, and by then it was too late. And I mean, again, as we spoke before, 89% of the Crimean population turned in their passports. Probably the majority of them didn't feel Ukrainian at all anyway, so they didn't think to like call the police or call anybody because
Yeah.
they're just like, yeah, whatever. The Russians are coming.
Back to normal.
And now there's actually now there's actually a bridge connecting Crimea and I think Rostov would be the Russian city near it. So it was like I remember the day when Putin went there and he was like he had a big thing. He's like, welcome back to Russia or whatever. So
Come back to me.
yeah, right. Okay, so here is the map. Hold on, let me get it up. It's on Wikipedia. All right. This probably changed because this map is from 2014. But you can see where the presence is. And it's kind of strange because right here, see, I remember I highlighted Donetsk a couple minutes ago. You have like declared republics from these Ukrainians that live in these areas. So there is like the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic, and these are what they call Russian separatists. That's what the Ukrainian government calls them. And they basically are doing the bulk of the fighting against the Ukrainian military. Russia's not. I mean, do you think that there's a Russian soldier or two that's maybe, helping them out? It's possible. Some people, I've seen like conspiracy theories where like that they're all Russian soldiers and they're just like wearing different uniforms and stuff. But I generally think that like a lot of these like Eastern Ukrainians don't really want to be part of Ukraine, especially if they're pursuing more ties with the EU. And if you think about it, if they pursue close relations with the EU, for these people in Eastern Ukraine that have probably a lot of family just over the border in Russia, that's not something that's really welcomed by them. They're like, all right, well, what's going to happen to my family, So basically, yeah, just to highlight what's going on here, you have the Ukrainian military, the actual Ukrainian military, fighting against these declared republics, and the Russian government and army is sending them weapons and stuff. That's basically what's going on.
Yeah, and to that point, if you want to know what the combat on that ground is really like, it's all trench warfare, believe it or not. And it's really people just getting killed by sniper fire.
Yeah.
And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of like how Russians operate when they try to do basically like private military, but it's just the state, right? They send people to Africa, they send people to Afghanistan, they do it like they contract everywhere, right? And there's a whole culture just behind what they can, like almost like squads or anything like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of contractors are really going there and making lots of money because that culture is a lot bigger in Russia than it is, almost anywhere else. Like America would be number 2, 1,000%.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like Russia's been selling weapons and doing that for a while. I mean, they gave weapons to China years ago and all that stuff. So trench warfare. That's a little outdated, but you do what you want.
A very a thing that people don't really understand and come to think is Eastern Ukraine actually gets very, very hot for them in the summer. So you'll regularly see temperatures of like 85 degrees, which might not seem a lot to us, maybe to Danny up there in Vermont now, but with them that's definitely taxing because they're not used to fighting in that climate, and a lot of them aren't prepared for it. I mean, granted, yes, it's been years now, they're probably more used to it, but definitely the heat and just being in the muddy trenches all the time will definitely wear on morale. And if you actually want to mention what the current president is doing, that would be a perfect time to do so.
Oh yeah. So one thing about almost a lot of the Ukrainian presidents are like this. At least the first one was as well. And in it that they see themselves as like this kind of like the general, or like almost like he has to be there for the army. So this guy literally runs around in the trenches with soldiers and peeks out of the blinds and like does runs with them all the time. There's a good video online if we want to see it. I got to pull it up.
Please. What?
Just to clarify, the president's name is Volodymyr Zelensky.
Vladimir. I see no difference.
He's actually a comedian, and he ran as a joke.
Yeah,
interesting.
And he won.
There was a Guatemalan, someone in Guatemala, I think in the 90s or something like that, who was a comedian, and did he become president? He became some high official in Guatemala, and then they were trying to arrest him over some
you gotta enable
something like that. Comedians. I mean, I guess it might be populist, who knows?
Just you disable the participant screen sharing. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, we can see. Let's get to the good bit. So you'll see him right. You think he's right. Let's back up so you can actually tell him. That's him right there. This is literally above trenches where they get sniped all the time. Like you're not gonna see Joe Biden doing this shit.
This seems like what Kim Jong-un. This seems like no, he'll fall on the stairs. This seems like a stunt that Kim Jong-un would do, except he's actually doing it. No
exactly.
Pony, no unicorn. What is he? He doesn't. He said screw a helmet, screw anything. Did he use hair that day? Oh my.
Usually nobody shoots the press, so they have all like blue colored stuff too. So he's probably not even worried at all. Especially with sniper fire, they're going to see the blue.
What if they're just like, oh, that's the president? No, that would cause something much worse if they were to shoot the president.
That's actually
like. Wouldn't it be the first time they shot a press though?
That guy in the hand, that's the president. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is him right here.
Yeah. So like you're never going to see like almost any modern day president do this. I would say this is like, pretty cool example of like a actual leader. You know what I mean? Like a not corrupt leader. I'd really like something like this. He probably dabbles in corruption. Everybody in politics does, but it's nice to see it.
He's there though. That's sick. Yeah. I applaud that. It's quite.
No, like 100%. It's you see that specifically in Eastern Europe too. I mean, they're all pretty crazy. They're just balls to the wall type people. That really does a lot for morale. Like seeing your president, like it makes you feel that you could fight for someone like that. So I'm sure that definitely helps the Ukrainian morale, and they're gonna need it if Russia actually, steps up their aggression. And
who would come to help?
That's what I was actually just wanted to segue into is what countries can we expect for them to see aid from, either actual like fighting or just supplies and stuff. What do you think?
One thing to consider is that the U.S. has already sent 2 humongous warships right over there, and Russia has already said. And this is some important stuff, because I don't think anything's going to go down. I don't think the United States would pull something like this over Ukraine. But anything can happen. Tensions between nations can spur within a moment notice. You've seen what happened within World War II and World War I and how those two conflicts started. You know what I mean? it really can be just a flick of the hat sometimes. So I really don't think America would be getting involved at all. And if America doesn't get involved, I don't feel like any nation's going to. And then what's going to happen? At least that section of Ukraine is going to be taken over again. I don't think all of Ukraine will be taken over, because then nations have to be like, okay, we were about to go put these guys in the UN, and Russia takes them over, then it'd be a different story. But I definitely feel like Ukraine's about to lose a lot of territory that might not really care. The populace of these places don't really care too much.
Mhm.
To be
I think when
honest,
it
they
comes to
really care about
territory, it
living.
does though. No, I mean, if they start cutting into it too much, it would be like World War II, where countries are like, I mean, you get into that country, fair, but you're coming into mine, so kind of a little too much right here.
Yeah,
uh,
I
I
think the most
think,
reaction is in NATO, though. Because
yeah,
NATO is probably going to do the most.
I think probably the most that you're gonna see is maybe Russia just taking this part right here, from Kharkiv to Mariupol. Um, any further, and then yeah, they're going to be kind of running the risk of um, international organizations
I mean,
being mad at them. They already have
I
Crimea.
mean, I think taking any would cause any. I think NATO or anybody to be angry.
Yeah, very true.
Uh,
Very true.
yeah, I mean, Russia's already the biggest landmass. Is the biggest landmass of any country. I mean, I think they're fine. They want
Well,
more.
there is, at least with Crimea, I feel like the reason why they did that is because they wanted a nice vacation spot. Not even kidding you, beforehand, Crimea was a famous Soviet vacation spot. So I guess Putin,
It's actually
missed his.
it's actually a very strategic location too for trade. It's right on the Black
Yeah,
Sea, next you to
that too.
all the other all those other countries that are connected to it, especially Turkey. Um,
Yeah. And they
so
really saw that as like, part of their own Crimea, I would say, just because of just all that semblance there, you know.
So why do you think, we've been discussing topics heavily on the media lately. So why do you think that something like this is not really discussed a lot?
That's a good question. And
Before we
I'll
go
tell
into
you
that, what
why.
you want to go? You go first. You go first.
Okay. But the reason why media doesn't want to discuss this is because America doesn't have very good answers when it comes to foreign policy. Like, for example, what is a regular American even going to care about this? We probably care about that we're fighting for democracy and freedom, but if you don't see America step up at all, it's kind of like disappointing, especially if you're one of those people that believes that America should be the police of the world. I'm not like that. So, I'm not really going to care too much about this conflict. I'm going to care about the people, yeah, but I don't think really anything too bad is going to come from this. However, it's just conflict, and I think the media really wants to keep on playing the game, which is keep everybody attention on social stuff that's going on in America and really just American stuff. Because when you start looking at other countries, at least in the media, you start seeing things that you're like, this would be good in America. This would be cool. Things against the status quo, and then the mass media machine will be like, get that the hell off. So I think they will cover it 100%. But as soon as like something happens and it's done, bye. They're not gonna care about it.
Yeah, but also I think the more we look into conflicts of other countries and talk about potential war with people who don't really understand the nitty gritty and diplomacy, and probably nothing will come about so harshly. People looking at that would think, oh, well, the problems in the U.S., they aren't so bad then. What are we fighting over here? Sizes of big gulps, you know? Uh, well, meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine could go murder each other in Taiwan if you get bombed by China. I mean, that's another thing. Keep the problems here large, that way, and this is something that people understand and are already used to. Keep feeding them this narrative.
Perspective is everything, that's for sure. If you look outward, you're going to probably appreciate what's going on here, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed here as well. So
Darn right.
um with that, I really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, like, we've had this ongoing, almost like at a standstill. There's been probably about like 27 ceasefires. It just, there's really no end in sight. And
You know, to give my analysis of what they're doing, I think this is the neo-imperialism. And what I mean by that is countries know that they can't make a huge freaking step because there's nuclear missiles everywhere and they don't want to die. So what do? They slowly increment into countries, at least Russia and China. They slowly increment into countries and do it in a way where they don't get, bashed by the world stage. They know better than to play chicken with the best. You know, I sure hope so, to be completely honest. But that seems like how it's going. So I think you're going to see a lot more of this happening in imperial nations. I could even see it happen in the United States. But there's what else, what are we going to take? Mexico? I don't think we want Mexico. So
Also
it's kind of that
artificial,
kind of situation.
even kind of like artificial type islands, going to that space. Off the coast of any country, the rules like what? They own 200 miles or something of that sort. And I see China kind of doing that, these maritime issues, going into these lands and kind of disputing who owns what. So that's kind of, it's along the same lines, a little opposite because you're going into the waters, but I see that as well. Like, what little things can we take? Because things are already so much established and seem so more civil as to what they were over 50 years ago, but 80 years ago. But that's an interesting point. Neo-imperialism,
one of the
something
big
to look
things,
at.
one of the biggest things that I'm just going to bring up right here, we'll close on this, but there's a reason why the Ukrainian government hasn't organized a vote for secession for these areas, because they know that they're going to want to. If you, so like right now, like, like de facto and de jure government, if Ukraine did that with Crimea now, like, I mean, it's a little too late now, but if they did that with Crimea, they overwhelming, they secede. It's kind of like a bit like California. I saw some poll that was like 50% of Californians would secede from the United States, and like, yeah. But it's a different world. It's a different world in Crimea, a different world in Eastern Ukraine. They don't live how Western Ukrainians do. So they attribute their living and lifestyle akin to more of like Russian culture. And it's just cool to see like actually how geography can sort of decide that too. Because it's definitely it's no coincidence that this language barrier starts at the river. No coincidence. So again, we'll see what happens with this. We come here to help you understand some of these other issues that are not being discussed in the media. Take with it what you will. You might say, yeah, whatever. Some people might not even like click on this episode, like Ukraine. I don't give a fuck, But and that's okay. But it always pays to learn. It always helps to know what's going on and be able to compare it to our society. And as well as if you feel like you want to show aid and support to these areas, you could do that. So, yes.
Very nice.
Yes. So we'll see how this one develops. I'm sure we'll have another episode on this maybe in a couple months or so if anything big happens. But other than that, a lovely time with you boys as always.
And you as well.
And
Yes.
for everyone else, have a great weekend. See ya.
All right.